Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Innovation Conversation. Today we are joined by Luis Valente. Luis, welcome.
Pleasure to be here, Ricardo. Thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Luis, you have an absolutely fascinating story behind you, so I'll let you introduce yourself to the audience.
Yes, so I'm Luis. I serve as CEO of iLoF. Background in engineering, trained as a computer scientist, but spent most of my life working elsewhere. In the last couple of years, I felt absolutely drawn and passionate about one of the biggest healthcare challenges of our times, which is scaling personalized healthcare and effective healthcare to the masses. So I've been working on a deep tech health tech company. It's based in the UK, in Portugal, and in the US, and we've been accelerating the arrival of personalized therapeutics to hopefully millions of patients around the globe.
Oh, this is absolutely. I was having a look at iLoF. It's absolutely fascinating what you guys do. How do you get started? Because this is, you have a background in computer engineering, and now you're doing something completely different. So how did that come to be?
So first of all, I think we've fell in love with the problem. So when
Mhm.
this is not the case for a lot of entrepreneurs where they fall in love with the product. That's not our case. We fell in love with the problem. We really realized that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there were really high expectations for the impact that personalized medicine would have on every person's everyday lives. And the reality is that if you ask a room full of people, like 100 people in an auditorium, how many of them did a genetic test in their lifetime? You'll realize that it's actually not a lot of people. And this was not the expectation 10, 15 years ago. And what we realized is that there were clear problems. So there were problems around the way we collect this data. There were problems around the way that we process this data. And it's still quite hard to collect personalized healthcare information at scale and create models that can actually change healthcare. And so in 2019, together with a couple other co-founders, I realized that there was a clear opportunity to take a technology to market that would tackle this need for more data sources, for better data sources. Over the course of around 10 weeks, we interviewed 100 global experts, stakeholders, CEOs of biotechs, pharmas, principal investigators, and after those 10 weeks, we had around 12 letters of intent that validated the need to work with us and the need for in the market for a product like ours. And yeah, that's pretty much how iLoF was born. So we're now a team of close to 30, balanced in 3 countries, and we raised around 10 million so far.
Did you get started in Portugal or in the UK?
Yeah, so technically we got started in both places, and I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
So, our first investor was a German, and um, and we started our operations in the UK in Oxford. So we actually started our operations in the Oxford University Accelerator, which was the Oxford Foundry. But our German investor didn't really wanted to take the risk that Brexit would bring. And they were like, okay, of course, you're a British company, you're operating in the UK, and all your operations are there. But I would prefer if the legal structure is outside of a Brexit location. And so we created a company in Portugal. Years later, when we closed our first round and when we brought 2 American investors in, we ended up pivoting and bringing also the legal operation into the UK. So yeah, that's why I say that technically we kind of started in the UK and in Portugal at the same time.
So this is actually quite interesting because I talk with a lot of people and they always have, if they're in the UK, they have the ambition to go to Europe or the US, and if they're in Portugal, obviously they want to go to the UK or the US. So you've actually been in all these three different markets. So where do you think it's best suited to actually start a company? Because you've had this experience for your life, you raised 10 million, so you know exactly how to do.
Well, so full disclosure, I might be biased. So I was born in
Mhm.
Portugal. So I'm not already disclosing my vision, but I was born in Portugal, so I might be biased towards the European ecosystem to the Portuguese ecosystem. Um,
Mhm.
that's point one. And point two, I think it really depends. So I don't think the best place to start an AI company is the best place to start a medtech company is the best place to start clinical trials, enabling company. It's the best place to start a crypto or fintech company. It really depends on the type of business. In our case, we're a deep tech health tech company. And as a deep tech health tech company, it was important to be number one, close to talent. So again, this is deep tech. This is really damn hard. Pardon my French, but it's really complicated. You need to bring in profiles that wouldn't necessarily work together. Data scientists, physicists, biologists, and you need to get all of this speaking together and getting something to actually create value for the third party on a daily basis. And so you need a pool of talent. Second, it's important that you are in an ecosystem that actually values deep tech because the path to market is longer. And to be very honest, non-dilutive funding in terms of either tenders or grants or are important in deep tech businesses. So that's point number two. And point number three, just overall, this regulatory framework. And again, these are just 3 points that kind of make the answer to your question vary. In our specific case, I do believe that potentially at this point, Europe and even Portugal might be a good place to be in the sense of financing wise. So there's a lot of capital for R&D in Europe right now. There's a lot of capital for R&D in Portugal right now. Talent wise, I would say potentially you're better off in the US or in the UK. And certification wise, you're certainly better off in the US, no doubt about it. So I think it's always going to be a trade off. And in the end, I mean, as long as you are able to assemble a group of talented, dedicated people, you should be fine.
I'm curious. So you mentioned when you got started, you first interviewed a couple of people, 100 people, you said, and then 10 of them actually wrote a letter of intent afterwards. So I guess what were the biggest challenges you had in the beginning? Because this is a brand new idea, and also the application. This is very creative, a brand new way of doing things. So what were the main challenges you had to overcome?
So various. And again, creating a startup is hard. Creating a deep tech startup is hard. Creating a deep tech startup in the health tech space is way harder. Number one, you need to create goodwill. You need to create an army of. So one of our investors, when they invested in iLoF, they were like, you know what, Luis? We were early at the time. They were like, okay, you're early. Maybe you don't have everything figured out. But every person that I speak to around you, like partners, customers, uh, uh, competitors, other VCs, other investors, every person I speak to, which knows you, they all say the same thing, which is, oh, we're not sure, maybe they'll need to pivot, whatever, but I want to help. They're a smart bunch of people. They're tackling a big mission. They're pursuing like a big impactful goal. I want to help. And this kind of goodwill, creating this kind of goodwill is hard. I wouldn't say it's a challenge. It's just hard. And I believe that as founder, so that I remember that when we were starting the company in 2019, we were part of a small bootcamp, small entrepreneurship bootcamp. And one of the mentors that were there, he mentioned, okay, when you're starting, you don't have anything. You don't have money. You don't have a space. You don't have an office. You don't have equipment. But there's one thing that you have, and that thing is salespeople. And the salespeople is you, right? The founder, right? That's the only thing you have. It's salespeople. So I always saw my position in the company very much as the advocates, the strongest, biggest, and the most clear advocates for the solution. And I would say making sure to create a group of people, either internally companies or internally talent employees or team, or externally with partners, with clients, just creating a group of people that believes in your vision and believes you can do it. I think this is one of the hardest things. But there's many more.
Well, I was wondering, when you approach all these investors and they give you that feedback, Was it hard to get more investors on board, or was it actually just took it as it is, and you say that, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong, I'm going to prove I can do this, and I'm just going to make this company super successful?
Uh, so fundraising is a little bit like dating. It's a numbers game.
Yeah.
So I've been with the same partner for most of my life, certainly most of my adult life. Uh, but a lot of people, so I can't speak firsthand, I guess, but a lot of people, they compare the dating game and the Tinder game to fundraising because it's going to be a numbers game, right? I mean, you need to scroll God knows how many Tinder profiles to get a match, and then out of these matches, 50% are going to ghost you, and then it's really a numbers game. It's going to certainly be a numbers game, uh, and all you need to do is you need to make sure that you have a big enough pipeline in the beginning. You need to make sure that you have a relevant pipeline, not just a big pipeline, but a relevant pipeline in the beginning. And then, and then when you get to the point where you see that you have a handful of investors that are a good fit, you need to know how to close. And you know that famous phrase, always be closing. So you need to close and you need to create this sense of urgency.
Interesting. And yeah, I was reading your profile and I noticed Forbes 30 under 30. So how did that happen? Did they reach out to you? Did you apply for it? How does the whole thing work?
Someone nominated me. Yeah. So I've been nominated by, I, it might have been a jury member, it might have been someone I know. They don't really disclose it, but it was a nice, let me put it like that. It helps me with the goodwill part and it helps open a couple of doors. Yeah, it's just one of these things that you, I guess, are happy about, and then you continue with your life. But yeah, thank you for mentioning
Do they have like a special badge they give out, a special card when like you want to go to a busy restaurant? Hey, I got this business card. It says for Forbes 30 under 30. I need to get in.
They do organize a couple of exclusive events. They do give you a badge, but I don't think I ever use it. They give you a digital and then like a real badge. I don't think I've ever
Real
used
badge.
either.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever used. So they give you like a not a badge, but they give you like a uh, like a diploma of some sort, or like a certification or something like that. Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, I don't think so. I do mention it on social media. That's mostly because again, it helps creating this goodwill.
Mhm.
Because basically, what is sad is that the problem I was working was big enough, and hopefully, I was doing a decent job. But more like the problem I was trying to tackle was big enough that it deserved to be noticed by Forbes. That's what it means to me.
It's a huge problem. So how does the whole thing work exactly? So
Yeah.
you kind of mentioned it briefly. I'm very curious to fully understand the process.
We're an AI first company. We collect very large amounts of data. We train AI models, and then we deliver and deploy solutions that help select the right patients for each clinical study. The way it
Okay.
works is that we have a physical and a digital component on our solution. The physical is basically sensors that allow us to collect data on biological fluids, and that can be easily deployed. Um, and then the platform, which is basically where the most of the value is where we integrate really very large quantities of data, not just from our um, not just from our own sensors, but also from other sensors. Yeah, and then create models that can identify the patient that is more likely to respond to a certain treatment.
So you don't actually make, obviously, I'm just trying to explain this to the audience. So you select what treatment they're going to better respond to, and then based on that, you tell the doctors, look, this is what we think that you should give them as treatment because they're going to have,
No, I do it. So we do it mostly within the scope of clinical trials right now.
Mhm.
So we do it mostly within the scope of uh, what is the patient that is going to be more prone to react well to this treatment. Try to
Mhm.
get these treatments approved. Try to get them in the market, and then once they are in the market, of course, the aim is to be able to then tell the right or tell to the patient which is the right treatment for him.
And I mean, is the future something that or in the future, will you have something where you go to the doctor does a simple blood test using your solution, and then they realize, actually, I shouldn't really prescribe you I'm going to give a very basic example. I shouldn't really prescribe you paracetamol because you don't respond well to it. Here's some aspirin. Is that going to be in the future?
Absolutely, that's the vision. The vision is that the same way that when you go to a clothes shop, uh, you ask for a T-shirt, they're going to ask you your size, right? Are you an M size? Are you an XL size? And if you're like giving a T-shirt at random, let's say you're an M size and you're giving an XL, you're going to put it on and it's not going to fit you. But you're not going to say it's broken. You're not going to say it's ruined. You're just going to say, no, I like T-shirts, just not my size. But today, this is not what happens in medicine. You go to the doctor or you go on a clinical trial and then you test the medication. And then if it doesn't work, they'll just assume the medication is worthless and it just doesn't work. And in a lot of cases, that's not the case. It works. It just doesn't work for everyone. It just doesn't work for everyone that has the same disease. And what we're finding is that there's going to be more and more treatments that will only work on a subset of the population. And this subset of the population is going to have to be defined via phenotyping and triaging tools such as iLoF.
Interesting. Because there's this thing in the travel advice from the UK government if you travel to Spain is be careful if you go to the doctor, because there's some type of painkiller. I don't remember the name of it, but I know for a fact that apparently everyone from the UK that takes that painkiller in the UK and Portugal, they instantly die. So it's not really good for, I guess, their ADN or the DNA. I'm not sure. But it's a good example where that could actually work, saying, hey, this medicine does not work for you at all, so don't even try.
Absolutely, and you have perhaps an even stronger example with COVID, right? I mean, people reacting very differently to the disease, but people also reacting very differently to the vaccine, right? Some people they got fully immune, and then the vaccine worked wonders, and with some others, it did almost nothing to increase their immunity, and in others, it was even causing very serious side effects. And we saw that at scale with more or less the same vaccines. And again, people having very, very strong and different reactions. This already happens in various other diseases, including Alzheimer's. So in Alzheimer's, in the last 20 years, there's been potentially over 400 clinical trials that failed. And they didn't fail because all of these medications were worthless. They failed because the disease is very heterogeneous. And the way that the patient reacts to a certain treatment is very different from the way that another Alzheimer's patient reacts to the same treatment. And if you don't have tools that can select your right shirt size, then these drugs are never going to be approved. And that's what iLoF is taking the market.
So this is quite interesting. Is there any limitations in terms of your solution? Like, is there any case where you say, actually, we cannot work with this type of drugs or that type of disease, or it actually works for everything?
So first of all, the big limitation is data, right? So again, everyone used. So normally it's said in AI, right, and in data science, which is garbage in, garbage out, right? So you need to have data sets, enough well-characterized data sets that you teach your algorithms how to look for specific profiles, specific features within these profiles. If you can't acquire good data sets, then you're doomed. Then you're never going to get there. Then, of course, there's going to be diseases that are more. So we look at biological fluids, and there's going to be diseases that are more easy to detect in biological fluids than others. So, for example, one of the reasons why we're working in neurodegenerative diseases is exactly because it's hard. It's a lot easier to detect traces of infectious diseases in biological fluids than to detect traces of Alzheimer's or even depression. But at this point, it's a path. So I can't tell you exactly which ones we are competent and which ones we perform less. But I can tell you that we currently are developing on a couple of areas, including oncology with ovarian cancer, neurodegenerative with Alzheimer's, and a couple others. And we believe that tools like iLoF and others are actually going to make an impact on quite an array of diseases and are going to be making personalized medicine available for the masses.
Do you think so? You operate in quite a lot of markets, and I know you're expanding to the US. Do you think it's it's not that it's easy. Do you think there's less regulation, or they're more open to implementing this type of technology in one market compared with the other, or it's all pretty much the same?
No, there is a cultural aspect. There are cultural barriers. I think it goes without saying that US is certainly a good place for innovation. It's especially a good place to sell innovation. Either it's a good place to develop innovation or not. There's conflicting opinions, but I don't think no one disagrees that it's the best place in the world to sell and deploy innovation. And people, institutions are very open to try out. The percentage of early adopters is a lot higher. And one of the things that you feel in the US is the tolerance to mistakes, the tolerance to failure. So the tolerance to failure in the US is a lot higher than in the UK, right? Even in the UK, and certainly mainland Europe. So I'll give you an example. If you fail in Germany, you're a disgrace. You're no good, you don't know what you're doing, you should go home and cry and rethink, right? If you bankrupt a company, then you're absolutely a disgrace. If you bankrupt a company in the US, you learned something. And you might be even more likely to get hired again because you learned how to grow a company enough that you actually then throw it to the ground. And hopefully they'll think, okay, you bankrupt a company. Have you learned something? Oh, I did. Okay, perfect. Don't do it again. And that's a very big difference in the shift. And that's why, again, it's the best market for selling innovation in the world. And even regarding venture capital, I think it goes without saying that it's by far the biggest venture capital market in the world.
When you moved to the US, did you find that the size of the checks of the investors were actually getting a lot bigger?
Oh,
Like,
they
did
are.
you actually?
Oh, we have a
Yeah.
ton of. So a significant portion of our cap table, Ricardo, is US investors. So we kind of we kind of felt that already, and yeah, it's just that the scale is different. It's just bigger because again, people are willing to make more risk, and also because private partners, and we're speaking pension funds, but not only, they're more willing to take risks. So if you think like, so let's what are pension schemes in the US? They're mostly stocks, right? They're mostly SP 500 and index funds, and that's it, right? And then you have an allocation for this, an allocation for bonds, an allocation for whatever. Now even crypto, right? And this I'm sure you've heard. There's a big discussion because in the UK, most of the pension funds they don't have an allocation to venture capital. They want outsized returns. They want to return and to assure that the pension money grows with inflation, but they're not willing to take risks. And that makes that in the last 20 years, if you look at the unicorns and if you look at the exits and if you look at the IPOs in Europe and you look at the IPOs in the US, there's no comparison because there's just a lot more money and it starts with the big money. And that's a big difference.
Would you tell someone who's just getting started, actually go to the US, spend some money opening a company in Delaware or something like that, and just go there because there's more money? Or would we actually say, let's start in the UK, and then eventually when you get to, Series A's, then start going for the US for some capital?
Open a company in the US just for the sake of opening in the US and then be based in the UK. That don't do. Investors are pretty sophisticated, and everyone will notice if you're local or not, if you belong or not. So opening a Delaware C Corp is not a silver bullet. If the question is like, should you move to the US and build in the US and create your team in the US, I'll tell you my opinion. I think raising a seed round is as hard in the US as it is in Europe, especially if you're European. So maybe if you're in the US, if you're American, maybe it's easier for an American to raise in the US versus an European raising in Europe. But I believe that an European raising in the US will have such a hard time as an European raising in Europe. The difference is going to be valuation, and the difference is going to be size of the round. But I have a strong conviction that if you're an European and you have no reason to move to the US, and you don't have US investors, and you don't have US customers, and you don't have a US team, and you don't have a US co-founder, and for some reason, uh, there's no very strong reason why you should build a company in the US, then don't build it, then stay in Europe until Series A, and then move to the US when you reach Series A stage.
That makes sense, because everyone's like always dreaming about the US. Oh, but it's such a huge market. We should go there. Well, actually, hold on.
Once you have product market fit,
Luis, I know we're running out of time. If people want to reach out to you, how can you do so?
I'm quite active in LinkedIn, so do feel free to reach out. Luis Valente, look me up. I'm normally quite responsive. Hopefully, if you ping me, I'll respond. Very happy to connect with, well, any like-minded entrepreneur, wannabe, or current founder, or just anyone on the tech or health tech ecosystems.
Sounds good. Luis, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ricardo. It was really a pleasure.